Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have an excellent show for you today, so please, if you could, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to Tochnyi. I ask you to do that because it will spread the word about the stream going on right now, and we have a great stream for you, so it's always very helpful to us to spread the word. Please also, if you could, check out our website, tochnyi.info. It's really great. It's got a lot of articles and research from all of our researchers who are doing excellent work. So if you ever want more information about some of the stuff we talk about, it's a great resource. And then, of course, we also provide some updates on social media, so you can check us out on Twitter or Blue Sky if that's your thing. And if you have any questions during the live broadcast, you can put them in chat or in the comments, and we will do our best to, at some point, address them at the Q&A segment at the end or in the future. So feel free to ask any questions you guys have in chat. Always like your feedback. So we have an excellent broadcast for you today. First, I will be providing the news report, as I usually do. That will be followed by Mr. Germany to Ukraine's report, and then we will have a very important interview from our contributor Alex S., and he'll introduce that for us later. And then we'll maybe just cover some extra news that didn't make it into the main segment and do some Q&A. So that's the plan for today. Hope everyone's ready. Sit, have a seat, and enjoy. We'll get right to the news. These are the main headlines as of April 27th, 2025. First up, we have operations. On the night of April 18th, Yevgeny Rydakov, a Russian engineer working on the modernization of electronic warfare systems deployed against Ukraine, lost his life in an explosion in the Russian city of Bryansk, located near the border. Reports from both Ukraine and Russian media surfaced on April 25th describing the incident. According to sources cited by RBC Ukraine, Rydakov and a colleague entered a vehicle that subsequently exploded. Rydakov led the design bureau at the Bryansk electromechanical plant and was tasked with enhancing the Krasuka electronic warfare system, which Russia employs to disrupt drones and airborne threats. It was reported that the colleague accompanying him, likely his deputy or assistants, also perished in the explosion. The Russian telegram channel MASH claimed that the blast was caused by an improvised device laden with shrapnel attached to the underside of the vehicle. At the time of reporting, no party has taken official responsibility for the attack. The Kyiv Independent noted that it could not independently verify the information and that Ukraine's military intelligence agency stated it was unable to confirm or deny details surrounding the event. Also this week, media reports indicated that the individual suspected of carrying out the operation against General Yaroslav Moskalik lived in the same apartment building. The suspect reportedly parked a car rigged with both explosives and a surveillance device outside the entrance on April 16th. Residents recalled seeing a Volkswagen Golf stationed near the building around that time, with a man matching the description of the suspect observed lingering nearby before disappearing. Further accounts suggested that the suspect departed Russia for Turkey on April 19th, just a few days after positioning the vehicle. The suspect was identified as Nat Kuzin, originally from Sumy, Ukraine, who had officially been residing in Russia's Karachi-Cherkassia region since 2015. In reaction to the incident, Russia's foreign ministry stated that there were grounds to suspect the involvement of Ukrainian special services. Images published by Russian media showed the wreckage of a Volkswagen Golf following the explosion in Balashikha on April 25th. The incident occurred less than 2 weeks after Russian forces conducted a missile strike on the city center of Sumy, Ukraine, resulting in the tragic loss of 35 civilians, including 2 children, and injuring 127 others. Ukraine's intelligence directorate has publicly blamed Russian personnel from the 112th and 448th Missile Brigades for that attack, which they labeled as an act of mass violence against civilians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky addressed the situation regarding a proposed ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, emphasizing that Ukraine would respond to Russian actions in kind. In a message shared via Telegram, Zelensky stated that if Russia decided to genuinely observe a full-scale ceasefire, Ukraine would match that posture. He noted that if true calm prevailed, Ukraine would even support extending it beyond Easter, aiming for a longer-lasting pause that could open the door to genuine progress towards peace. However, he expressed skepticism and pointed out that short-term gestures are easy to stage for public relations, but true trust building requires sustained commitments over a longer period. According to Zelensky, reports from Ukraine's military leadership confirm that Russian forces continue aggressive maneuvers across parts of the front line, with artillery bombardment still ongoing. Due to these actions, Ukraine remains wary of trusting any declarations from Moscow, viewing them as potentially deceptive based on past experience. He reiterated that Ukrainian forces will continue to respond thoughtfully and proportionally to any hostile activity and ensured that every provocation would receive an appropriate answer. And of course, that so-called ceasefire, if it could in fact be called that, has now concluded. Up next, we have economy and aid. Japan's Kyushu University Institute for the Kyushu Pioneers of Space, or IQPS, has reached an agreement to supply Ukraine's military intelligence agency with synthetic aperture radar imaging, according to reports by Intelligence Online published on April 21st. Discussions between Japanese and Ukrainian officials reportedly began in February and became more urgent after the United States temporarily suspended intelligence sharing with Kyiv in early March. IQPS, which is planning to launch its 7th SAR satellite by the end of 2026, committed to a timeline of 2 to 3 months to integrate the necessary software into Ukraine's intelligence platforms, the magazine reported. SAR imaging technology allows for the creation of detailed 2- and 3-dimensional representations of terrain and infrastructure and is valued in military operations for its ability to function effectively in all weather conditions. Such capabilities are especially useful for monitoring enemy positions and movements. The interruption by the U.S. previously has raised serious concerns about potential future disruptions and caused Ukraine to look for alternatives. The World Bank has committed $70 million to assist Ukraine in ensuring the continued stability of energy infrastructure. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal announced the development on Facebook, as reported by Ukrinform. He announced that the agreement was finalized in Washington during a meeting with Anna Bierde, the World Bank's managing director of operations. According to Shmyhal, the funding will be directed to Ukraine's state-owned hydroelectric company, Ukrhydroenergo. The company will use the resources to acquire energy storage systems, which will help build reserves of electricity and bolster the country's overall energy security. Shmyhal expressed gratitude to the World Bank and other international partners for their ongoing support and emphasized that Ukraine's energy sector has sustained extensive damage as a result of Russian strikes targeting critical infrastructure. During the previous winter, Russian strikes targeted 34 facilities belonging to Ukraine's largest gas producer, Ukrgazvidobuvyana, which resulted in nearly half of the company's gas production being disrupted. The impact was particularly severe in cities like Kryvyi Rih, Mykolaiv, and Kherson, where the damage to the gas network and ongoing assaults threatened to leave over 1 million residents without essential energy services, according to the company's statement. In response, emergency teams have worked continuously to stabilize the situation, and the company secured more than 5 billion hryvnia in humanitarian assistance to prevent the energy systems from collapsing. To mitigate the damage and prepare for future needs, Naftogaz has imported 800 million cubic meters of gas and begun extensive repairs to its own infrastructure. These efforts are intended to strengthen the network ahead of the 2024-2025 autumn and winter seasons and to make up for previous losses. By March, Ukraine had reported that it had successfully restored more than half of the gas production volumes disrupted by the attacks. Roman Chumak, the interim CEO, stated that preparations for the upcoming winter were already underway and that since the beginning of 2025, Naftogaz has secured contracts for 1.5 billion cubic meters of gas, including 400 million cubic meters specifically allocated for the winter season. Ukrainian production of the Bodana self-propelled artillery system has now reached a monthly output of up to 36 units, according to a report from Army Technology citing its own sources. While the Defense Procurement Agency officially stated that production was exceeding 20 units per month, Army Technology's separate source indicated that deliveries had already climbed as high as 36 systems within that time frame. And to put that into context, that would make it one of, if not the most mass-produced motorized artillery systems on the planet. Probably screwed up the terminology there, but just letting you guys know that. Serial manufacturing of the Bodana artillery system began in early 2023, and since then, at least 5 different variants have been developed, distinguished by various chassis and cabin designs. By May 2024, Ukraine announced it was producing as many as 10 units monthly, a figure that the president later updated to 20 units per month. By March, representatives of the manufacturer confirmed to the media that production had surpassed 20 units monthly. To safeguard the manufacturing process, production facilities have been dispersed across multiple locations, including sites abroad. Components are duplicated across different locations to ensure that no single strike could halt overall production. The cost of each Bodana system ranges between 2.3 and 2.8 million euros, with the price influenced by specific chassis configurations. As of early 2025, more than 85% of the parts for the system are produced domestically in Ukraine, and efforts are underway to raise this to 95% by the end of the year. Field reports from Ukrainian artillery crews have generally been positive, praising the Bodana for its high firing precision and durability. Crews report being able to fire between 7,000 and 8,000 rounds without a significant loss of accuracy, and noted that its precision surpasses that of some Western systems. However, reliability issues with certain components, including the afterburner, are still being addressed. The Bodana artillery system has already been incorporated into at least 18 brigades across Ukraine's defense forces, spanning the Army, Marines, National Guard, a special consolidated brigade of the National Police, and even Special Forces under the Defense Intelligence Directorate. The Security Service of Ukraine reported the detention and seizure of a foreign vessel accused in aiding Russia in the unlawful removal of Ukrainian agricultural goods from regions under temporary occupation. According to a statement from the SSU's press office, as relayed by an Ukrinform correspondent, the operation was conducted jointly by the SSU and the State Border Guard Service within Ukraine's Black Sea internal waters. Investigators determined that the vessel in question belonged to a clandestine fleet utilized by Russia to transport Ukrainian grain to third-party countries without authorization. Evidence revealed that in late 2024, the ship had departed from the occupied port of Sevastopol, carrying 5,000 tons of wheat carried from southern Ukrainian territories under Russian control. In an effort to conceal the operation, the ship sailed under the flag of an Asian nation. During the search of the vessel, officials uncovered documents, navigation tools, and other tangible proof that directly linked the ship to the unlawful transport of Ukrainian agricultural products. Following the vessel's seizure and the detention of its crew, authorities began further investigative measures to uncover the full extent of the violations and to pursue accountability for those involved. Ukraine's real gross domestic product grew by 1.1% during the first quarter of 2025, according to the monthly economic monitoring report released by the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting. The IER clarified its estimates based on data published by the State Statistics Service, which includes figures from sectors such as industry and construction. Their breakdown showed GDP rising by 1.2% in January and 0.7% in February. Improvements in electricity availability and a gradual uptick in demand were cited as the main factors contributing to stronger economic performance in March over February. The IER estimated that real GDP grew by 1.3% during that month. However, not all sectors experienced growth. Agricultural value fell by approximately 3%, and there's a continued decline in household livestock production. Industry fared better, with real gross value added growing by 2.5% over last year. In contrast, extractive industries reported a contraction of over 3%. This is attributed to the temporary loss of several coal mining sites in the Donetsk region and the continued strikes on gas production facilities. Transportation also showed difficulties, with real GVA in March estimated to have fallen by around 6%, consistent with February's revised figures. The slowdown in railway freight, exacerbated by cyber attacks, outweighed modest gains in other areas of the transport sector. Additionally, the effects of the suspended gas transit routes continued to weigh on the broader transportation industry. On April 24th, the Ukrainian government announced that it had been unable to reach a deal with its creditors to restructure approximately $2.6 billion in outstanding obligations. As a result, Ukraine now faces the possibility of missing a $600 million payment that comes due in late May, which would raise concerns about a potential financial default. According to an official statement issued after a series of negotiations held in Washington from April 15th to the 23rd, Ukraine rejected the latest proposal from a group of restricted holders and indicated that it would not offer an alternative before the end of the agreed restricted period. Despite this breakdown in talks, Kyiv emphasized its intention to maintain a dialogue with creditors and to explore alternative pathways to address the restructuring challenge. The disputed $2.6 billion relates specifically to GDP warrants, a type of financial instrument that entitles investors to additional payments based on Ukraine's economic performance. Finance Minister Serhiy Marchenko noted that these warrants were conceived under very different circumstances and argued that Ukraine's recent modest economic growth should not be interpreted as a robust recovery, but rather as a fragile bounce back from a near 30% collapse triggered by the full-scale invasion. Marchenko stressed that warrants should not be allowed to impede Ukraine's broader economic recovery and expressed Kyiv's goal of achieving a fair and comprehensive solution. These GDP warrants had not been included in Ukraine's earlier restructuring agreement that it concluded in July of 2024, which addressed around $20 billion of national debt and allowed the country to avoid financial collapse while continuing to fund its defense efforts. However, the unresolved status of the warrants now poses new risks to the Ukrainian financial system. The International Monetary Fund has cautioned that a failure to resolve the dispute could jeopardize Ukraine's ability to secure future debt restructuring agreements and could also endanger its $15.6 billion extended fund facility program. Russian authorities are preparing for a continued decline in oil prices, with the Economic Development Ministry significantly lowering its forecast for 2025. They now expect Urals crude to average around $56 per barrel, which would be the lowest since the pandemic-driven collapse in 2020. This new estimate is well below the price planned for Russia's federal budget, meaning that the government would likely face a serious financial strain. Under Russia's budget rules, when oil prices are strong, extra revenues are saved in the National Wealth Fund. But when prices drop below a certain level, the government has to pull from those savings to cover the gap. With a current sharp fall in global oil prices, revenue from oil and gas in Russia's budget dropped by 10% in the first quarter of 2025 compared to the year before, with an even steeper decline in March. Experts state that even a small drop in the oil price could cost Russia billions in lost income each year. If prices stay this low, analysts predict that Russia could face a shortfall close to 1 trillion rubles. The overall budget deficit for 2025 could end up significantly higher than planned. Some of the missing funds might be covered by increased income from other sources, helped along by inflation and modest economic growth. Officials have raised their inflation forecasts but kept their economic growth expectations steady for now, citing a relatively strong start to the year. Despite this, the financial pressure remains high. Analysts state that Russia's reserve funds are already being heavily used and flexibility is limited due to the government's priority on defense spending. Although officials insist the deficit will stay manageable, early figures suggest it's already larger than anticipated. And looking ahead, Russian authorities expect only a small to modest recovery in oil prices over the next few years. Two Russian companies, Impexdon and the Don Coal Trading House, which had leased 15 coal mines in Ukraine's occupied Luhansk and Donetsk regions, have decided to abandon 9 of them. According to a report by RBC, the companies concluded that the high operating expenses combined with low global coal prices make continued operations financially unfeasible. The future of the abandoned sites is now under debate between Russian state officials and private investors who had acquired property rights when Moscow began selling off the mines last year. Disagreements center around who will be responsible for the costly process of drafting closure plans for the non-viable mines and covering the expenses needed to maintain them until they are formally decommissioned or mothballed. RBC estimates that the total yearly maintenance cost for the affected mines could be around 2 to 3 billion rubles, or around $30 million. Ukrainian authorities estimate that between 2014 and 2022, Moscow's proxy administrations in Luhansk and Donetsk sent around 2.8 million tons of coal per year into Russia, generating around $288 million annually. Prior to Russia's intervention in the region, there were reportedly 95 functioning coal mines. However, how many remain operational today is not clear. The Donetsk coal basin, one of the largest in the world, has been targeted by Russian authorities for restructuring. In 2023, Moscow drafted a plan to revitalize the local coal sector by attracting new private investment, and by 2024, leases for the mines had begun to be issued to the private investors. And finally, we have a lot of developments this week in international relations. So first, to set the stage a little bit, this week saw notable diplomatic movement as efforts to outline a framework for ending the Russian invasion in Ukraine continued, although major disputes remain between Washington and Kyiv. According to CNN, which cited a source familiar with the discussions, the primary points of contention involve security guarantees for Ukraine and the American stance on Russia's control over Crimea. Ukraine is seeking security commitments not just from European countries, but also directly from the United States, while the American draft emphasized Europe as the main provider of such guarantees. Another major divide is the U.S. proposal that would tacitly accept Russian control over Crimea, a position Ukraine finds entirely unacceptable. Ukraine also insists that the issue of Russian-held territories captured after 2022 must be resolved following the ceasefire. In response to the initial American framework, Ukraine, together with France, the UK, and Germany, submitted a counterproposal. This new proposal, presented to U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg, calls for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire by both sides as a prerequisite for any further steps. Despite these differences, Ukraine has agreed to several parts of the U.S. plan. Ukrainian officials reportedly accepted that sanctions placed on Russia since 2014 could be gradually lifted following the implementation of a peace plan. They also agreed not to pursue NATO membership, to freeze the current battle lines, and to regain control of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant area. Ukrainian sources emphasize their willingness to discuss territorial issues, and this marks a major shift in their position, but express concern that if President Trump does not view this as a major concession by Ukraine, it could complicate the negotiations further. According to reporting by European Pravda, citing the New York Post, discussions are underway around forming a joint commission as part of U.S. President Donald Trump's proposed peace plan. This commission would include representatives from Ukraine, Russia, and a non-NATO country, and would be tasked with monitoring compliance with a potential ceasefire agreement. Although many aspects of the peace plan are still being finalized, a senior official from the Trump administration mentioned that one idea being considered is the deployment of European forces into Ukraine if a ceasefire is achieved. These troops would form what is being called a resiliency force, which would contribute to the security guarantees that Ukraine has been seeking. While the U.S. itself may not send troops to the country, it could participate by providing financial support alongside a third-party nation. In addition to the resiliency force, there would be a separate mission focused purely on overseeing the ceasefire. This body, made up of Russians, Ukrainians, and representatives from a non-NATO country, would monitor the front lines and ensure both sides adhere to the ceasefire terms. The New York Post noted that it could not independently verify all the new claims surrounding the plan. However, it cited statements from senior U.S. officials largely corroborating these accounts and indicating that the most sensitive point for Ukraine in recent talks has been related to territorial issues. This week in the UK, The Telegraph reported that the U.S. has been privately offering to provide security guarantees for this coalition of the willing initiative led by the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. According to the report, U.S. officials have indicated a willingness to support a European military presence in Ukraine through intelligence sharing and logistical assistance, following the conclusion of a peace agreement. Downing Street reportedly views this American offer as a major breakthrough after they had been pressuring the U.S. for such a guarantee over the past 2 months. The proposed support would involve helping European forces operating by land, air, and sea to uphold the terms of a future peace deal. While Trump has avoided making public commitments on the matter, behind closed doors, U.S. negotiators have suggested that the U.S. would back a Western force, although the question of direct intervention in the event of an attack remains unresolved. In an interview with The Telegraph, Starmer emphasized the importance of securing American backing for the plan, noting that Trump had privately reassured him multiple times that U.S. support would be available. Trump also recently stated that a peace deal was, quote, pretty close following direct talks between U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to Sky News, the foreign ministers of the UK, France, Germany, and Ukraine have postponed a high-level peace meeting that was originally set to take place in London on April 23rd. For now, discussions will continue, but only at the level of senior officials rather than involving the top diplomats. The UK Foreign Office, as quoted by The Guardian, confirmed that the talks would still happen, but behind closed doors and with a reduced format. Despite the change, Andriy Yermak, the head of the Ukrainian president's office, confirmed that Ukraine's delegation had arrived in London, accompanied by the defense minister and foreign minister. The decision to postpone the ministerial gathering came after the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio withdrew from the meeting, citing logistical challenges relating to his schedule. Following the withdrawal, France and Germany reportedly halted preparations for their ministers to attend. While higher-level talks have been put on hold for now, there does remain the possibility that a ministerial meeting will be organized at a future date. This week's diplomatic efforts culminated with a significant, although brief, meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky at the Vatican, held quietly on the sidelines of Pope Francis's funeral. It marked their first encounter since a tense Oval Office meeting months earlier. Zelensky described the Vatican meeting as a meaningful and symbolic moment and expressed hope that it could lead to lasting results, particularly regarding an unconditional ceasefire. Images shared by the Ukrainian presidency captured the two leaders engaged in an intense discussion near the altar where the Pope's simple coffin was displayed. Zelensky later wrote that they spoke extensively about protecting lives, achieving a full ceasefire, and securing a stable peace that would prevent future conflict. Ukrainian aides characterized the discussion as constructive, while the White House called it highly productive. Although the meeting drew considerable international attention, Trump departed Rome as planned immediately after the funeral without any additional talks scheduled. However, he and Zelensky briefly joined British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron inside the Basilica for an informal discussion. Macron later described the exchange as positive and also met with Zelensky separately. While in Rome, Trump claimed that progress had been made and urged both sides to hold direct high-level talks to finalize an agreement, stating that most of the key points were already settled. Frustration on Trump's side is reportedly growing, with the U.S. president warning that he might abandon peace efforts altogether if more tangible movement towards a ceasefire is not achieved soon. And last item for this week, according to The Times, the United Kingdom is reconsidering earlier plans to deploy thousands of troops to Ukraine due to concerns that such a move would carry too much risk. Gee, if they had only gone to Tochnyi.info back in February when my colleague Erlend had written an article that outlined exactly all of the problems they were describing, maybe they wouldn't have had to make all those public promises. Anyway, instead, the approach to military support is shifting, with British and French instructors likely to be sent to the western parts of Ukraine, far from the front lines. These instructors would not be stationed near strategic targets, nor directly involved in protecting Ukrainian forces. This revised plan still aligns with maintaining a military presence in Ukraine, but limits exposure to high-risk areas. Air cover would be provided to the instructors by Western aircraft, ensuring some level of security from the skies. Turkey is expected to take on an important role on the naval side of the operation, which is still being finalized. Weapons deliveries from the UK and European allies will continue, ensuring that Ukraine remains well armed if Russia fails to respect any future peace agreements. Although final decisions have yet to be made, the British Ministry of Defense has made it clear that the option of sending troops in some form remains on the table for consideration. Diplomatic discussions within the Coalition of the Willing previously floated the idea of deploying tens of thousands of ground forces, but concerns over the scale of the task and the risks have led to a rethink. Some Ukrainian officials, however, are concerned that foreign training personnel could be quickly pulled out again if conditions worsen, similar to the withdrawal of British forces just before the full-scale invasion in 2022. A diplomatic source involved in the talks told The Times that the shift in the UK's position is intended to pressure Moscow into adjusting its own so-called red lines, with the aim of moving closer to a peace settlement. And that wraps up the main headlines for this week. We will now move to the next segment.
Yeah, and that would be me. Damn, Joseph, what a roast. Yeah, hello guys. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. On Thursday, with extensive financial assistance from the German government, a new nephrology and dialysis department has been opened in the Okhmadut Children's Hospital in Kyiv. I'm very sorry if I butchered that name. Which was badly damaged last year due to a Russian terrorist attack. This was announced by the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. In addition to dozens of medical devices and furniture for launches, treatment rooms, and more, two water treatment systems, a fire protection system, ventilation and air conditioning systems, a medical lift for transporting patients in beds, the renovation of a surgery room, and a powerful photovoltaic system to protect the department from power outages were also financed by Germany. A brief look back, shortly after the Russian attack on the Children's Hospital, the German government provided a total of 14 million euros, 4 million for emergency funds and 10 million for the reconstruction. And already my last bit of this week, very quiet week, I reported on Friday that the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine have begun preparations for implementing SAP Defense and Security, the automated defense resource management system used by 28 NATO armies. The project gets financed completely by the US as well as Germany. The updated processes will be implemented by an international team that includes German and Ukrainian SAP specialists, experts from Ukrainian defense agencies, and representatives, oh, damn, what's happening today, of an international implementation partner. In addition to the funding provided by Germany and the US, specialists from the armed forces of Germany, Canada, the Netherlands, Poland, and the US are also providing counseling support for the project, which is intended to be completed by 2027. And yeah, that's it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph.
Thank you, sir. So I would just implore our audience once more, please do like the stream, subscribe to Tochnyi. Also, if you could just spread the word that the stream's happening, just because our colleague Alex S. Has a very excellent interview that he's worked quite hard on. And we'd really appreciate it if everyone could, get as much exposure to this thing as possible. So with that being said, I know I ask you guys to do that all the time, but I really mean it this time. Please do it. I'll turn it over to Mr. Alex S. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Joseph. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, very good. So, as you might remember, I do have quite a big project about covering the situation in Mariupol and occupied territories, but especially cover Mariupol. And I had the fortune to interview Petro Andriushchenko, who is a former advisor to the mayor of Mariupol and one of the leading voices for the occupied territories, and most recently he became the head of the Center of the Study for Occupation. And this is a center that analyzes what is happening in the occupied territories to prepare for the deoccupation. So they are looking to the future with focus about Ukrainian people who are living under the occupation. They're trying to track any aspect of the life of the people under occupation, tracking what the occupiers are doing, any kind of war crimes or anything, demolitions, rebuildings, which is something that I'm also trying to track. And during the interview, which is about 50 minutes long, that we had earlier this week, we discussed about several topics. The first one was about the reverse filtration system that people who escaped from occupied territories have to go through if they want to try to reclaim their properties, in especially in Mariupol, because this is not really happening in other cities because they're basically destroyed. While in Mariupol there is still something to reclaim, but of course Russians are trying to steal everything they can from the rightful owners. So a lot of people from Ukraine or European Union have to go back to Mariupol to show that they are the rightful owner of apartments and houses. Otherwise, the Russians will steal and resell to Russians to go on with their people displacement project. And after that, we discussed about the population, the demographics in the occupied city. And Petro told me that he estimates that about 80 to 100,000 people who live in Mariupol today are original Ukrainian people. And you have to remember, Mariupol used to have about 500,000 inhabitants before the invasion. And most of the people, so Ukrainian people who remain in the city, are retired old people. They only have about 15,000 children and a very small amount of adults in a working age. And on the other side, they have about between 80 and 100,000 Russian who moved in the city, and we're not talking about servicemen. So military people who are in the city, it's about 15,000. So in total, we talk about less than 200,000 people. So below the half of the people who used to live in the city before the invasion. Even if the Russian, I have seen some numbers in the local channels, they estimate that they've got more than 320,000 people who moved back to the city. So they are claiming that 320,000 Ukrainians went back to Mariupol after the invasion, and it really makes no sense. I mean, we know that unfortunately a lot of people died and a lot of people never got back to Mariupol. So they are doing propaganda all the way. And after that, we discussed about the housing problem in Mariupol is a big issue. I asked Petro about most recent estimates and numbers from occupiers because they are pushing a lot about how much they are rebuilding the city. But in fact, they rebuilt less than 10% of what they destroyed. And we're just talking about apartments. We're not talking about private housing. There is no track about the private houses that have been demolished. I'm making this map of Mariupol, and it's impossible to track the destruction of the private sectors of the city. There is nothing left, more or less. Just a few houses here and there, but most of them are gone. And what he told me is that now they are rebuilding a lot of apartments, and I see that in the pictures and videos that I'm tracking. During the last year, Russians have really started to build at a high speed. But the issue here is that they're not building new blocks and apartments for the people who lost their houses, but only to sell to Russian who are moving to Mariupol. And in fact, you know that the interest rate in Russia, the basic interest rate in Russia is 21%, if I'm not mistaken. But if you want to get a mortgage to buy an apartment in Mariupol, it will be only 2% for you. So it's really convenient for a lot of people to invest their money and buy something in Mariupol. After that, we discussed a little bit about the videos that have appeared on YouTube and YouTube channel of people who are Mariupol residents who were complaining because after 3 years under the occupation, they lost their house during the siege of Mariupol in spring 22 and are still homeless today. And Petro estimates that it's about 20,000 people who are homeless today in Mariupol. They're still there, and he really, during the interview, he says he's not able to explain why they are remaining there. But yeah, now they've been complaining through videos. We counted about 70 videos where they're making appeals even to Putin himself, which it makes me laugh, to be honest, uh, to get help because nobody is helping them. And according to Petro, this is also a political move between Morkun, who is the leader of the city under occupation, and Pushlin, who is the leader of the Donetsk People Republic. So it's internal fights at a political level between pro-Russian and Russia. So it's quite a complex topic. After that, we discussed about the economy of the city, what people are living off, and it's really hard to explain, to be honest. Most of the money that are floating through the city are from Russia for the reconstruction of the city, for servicemen who are staying in the city. Again, we are talking about 15,000 people who are military men in Mariupol. And yeah, Petro sees Mariupol for Russia not as a city for the people, but a logistics server center for the military operation, and of course for as a link between Russia and Crimea. And a very important topic that we discussed about at the end of the interview was the militarization of the youth, and this is something really disturbing. There are hundreds of videos, and now that we are getting close to the 9th of May, they're becoming more and more about children from an age of 3 years old and up to 18 who are getting indoctrinated at schools from military servicemen using guns, using Kalashnikov, handling mines. That's really disturbing. And it's disturbing by itself because they are children with weapons. And as Petro says during the interview, it's disturbing because these are children today. But in the future, they will be warriors that Russia wants to use not only against Ukraine, but against Europe. So we should really think about that and support Ukraine. So we can start the interview now. Hi, Petro Andriushchenko. Welcome
Hi.
back. Welcome back to Tochnyi. Thank you very much for joining us again today after last year's interview. So for those in our publicum who might not know you, Petro Andriushchenko is a former advisor to the mayor of Mariupol. He is one of the leading voices of Mariupol during the occupation, and more recently, he became the head of the Center for the Study of Occupation. Today, we are going to cover multiple topics, but I would like to start with your new role. So, could you kindly explain what the Center for the Study of Occupation is and what its goals are?
Yeah, the main goal of our center is, of course, it's studied the occupation. I mean, we try to make lots of research about our occupied territory, not about like just territory, but about people, about new society, about Russian authority for now, and some trends. We try analyze everything. So the main idea, we have to know, we must know what happened in occupied territory, because we show that the occupation will be, it doesn't matter what time and when we occupied our territory, but we have to know what happened there and what our people think, all kind of this. It's one of the part. I think I can say that we measured the shadow, because we tried to find everything and understand everything. We like cut our action to big for two big parts. One part, it's of course it's about army, about war situation, and about occupied units, all kind of the stuff. And one part, that's about our society. First of all, it's about Ukrainian society in occupation. So all the trends, all the, what our people think, what they want, what they are doing now, and what we can predict it about future, and how we can help, and how we can prepare to the occupation, of course, because it's a lot of thing, a hard discussion and hard thing wait us in the future, of course. So, and finally, we try to understand everything, and for that we organized our center.
Thank you. So before we start discussing about Mariupol, I would like to discuss a little bit about the situation in the occupied territories. And reading your Telegram channel, I was struck by the fact that several thousand of Ukrainians had to return to the occupied territories in the past months, and mainly for economic reasons. Some of them could not afford the cost of living in Western Ukraine, while others return in hopes to reclaim their properties, and perhaps with the intention of living again later. And I know this is a topic which is one of your top priorities. So could you please elaborate on the reasons behind the difficult decision of people getting back, what they face when they are under the occupation again? And could you please describe the reverse filtration process that they have to go through to get back in the occupied territories?
Yeah, it's a hard decision for everyone to back to occupation. The economic reason is the first reason in this story, but we have some other reasons and some other problems with that, but it's not about that. Yeah, so it's about filtration. Yeah, every Ukrainian citizen that who haven't Russian citizen for now, who haven't Russian passport, they must to enter to the Russia, and then through the Russia to occupied territory, finally to their home of our people. They have came through the Sheremetyevo airport. Sheremetyevo, we have one of the biggest and strongest filtration point of Russian security services, and it's like a torture because it's a strange process. So finally they try to check everything, every gadget, every reason. They lots of hours, long hours of conversation with our people, which each other, for why they want to back home and what they doing before and everything. So every their life, and finally someone of Secret Service staff decide that you can enter to and back home finally, or not, or they deported our people. The numbers of people who came through the filtration, or numbers of people who cancelled to enter to Russia, it absolutely different story. So I mean proportion, yeah. Sometimes Russian decide to permit and for everything, for everyone, and sometimes nobody can enter the occupied territory. So it's very hard process. It took some days, and all these days people are staying in Sheremetyevo without food, just a water, and without any, I don't know, any patient from the Russian. So it's really it's like a torture. But after that, if our people have or take a Russian passport, they can enter the occupied territory through any airports, through any points from any countries. So it works like this story, and we don't know. So sometimes they stop to permit for our people to enter, sometimes not. Now we're in a point when they promoted as promoted in Ukrainian society to back home to Zaporizhia region, first of all in Kherson region, because they haven't Russian who want to remove from Russia to occupied territory, and they have to lots of worker in their territories. So they decided to start again the promotion campaign inside the Ukrainian society in telegrams and something like that. And for now, it's some easier for people from Zaporizhia region or Kherson region to back home. So let's see. We don't know what we can see in the future, in the nearest future. For now, the situation is the same.
I understand. Thank you. And recently, you gave an interview to an Italian media outlet where you mentioned that also hundreds of Ukrainians are still leaving the occupied territories each month. And are these people who are leaving the occupied territories for the first time after 3 years of occupation, having finally realized that they have no future under Russian occupation, or are people who went back to the occupied territories temporarily to settle their properties and then go back to freedom again?
Yeah, people, it's the most number of people who back home, they not back home for forever. So they try to back home and re-register their property in Russia law, during Russia law, and then back to the shelter in evacuation. So it might be EU countries or Ukraine, it doesn't matter. So, but yeah, we have this trip for saving your property. It doesn't work in reality, because for now the Russians start a new process, start a new action at about like second inventarization, and they checked everyone who stay in Mariupol or who entered, who back to evacuation, and like they start a new process to find and for ownless property in Mariupol. I mean, so how they mean? So it's a hard process, but yeah, lots of people. I mean, if we talk about numbers, it might be some thousands of people back to Mariupol and then back to evacuation after they can register all this properties. But yeah, but everybody from that have to they had a Russian passport for now, so they like have a second citizen for Russian, because it's one chance to have a registering to register your property in Russian data services. I mean, so it's a hard story for everyone. It's like from one side, yeah, we have to think it about our people, about property, because but finally, it's as for me, like it's my personal opinion, but it's the stupidest thing sometimes, because you can't use your property if you stay in evacuation, you know. I mean, finally, from the one hand. From the other hand, like it's a big issue about security, European security, Ukrainian security. It's one of the easiest way that showed us like how easy to Russian agent have to come to European Union countries, actually, first of all, or in Ukraine. And if in Ukraine we have like some strong control from our secret services and our police and all kind of these services, I mean. So what with the European Union countries is a big question. So it's so easy. It's lots of people. It's 100 and 1,000 people month by month. So who knows? We think it's very dangerous for Europe because everybody think about future war against the Russia. So
Yeah, no, you make a good point. You know, I've been looking a lot through Instagram accounts, and I see really a lot of people who one day are in occupied territories, and then suddenly they are in Europe, and I wonder who these people are. So that's a very good point that you made. So now I would like to move the focus on Mariupol. And a couple of months ago, in your Telegram channel, you published a detailed analysis of the city's demographics, economy, and housing, and based on both the occupiers' data and your team's research. So could you please share some of your findings with our listeners, starting with your updated estimate of the current population in Mariupol? How many are the original inhabitants, and how many come from Russian Federation?
yeah, sure. So if you talked about our city, about Mariupol, about Ukrainian citizens who stayed in under the occupation, so it's very interesting thing about demographic. Why? Because the most part of the people, it's retired people. So finally, we count that in Mariupol stay. It depends of the season, of course, but now it's spring and near the summer, so we can say that in Mariupol near the 80,000 people, near the 100,000 people. So in these gaps, I mean, and lots of them near the 60,000 people, it's retired people. So it's very old city, you know, in this reason. So we have some numbers of children, Ukrainian children now in occupied Mariupol, and near the 15,000, from 15 to 17. Near then it depends of the age, so it's hard to count, of course, but we know it from our insiders in occupied authorities. And all the other people, it's adults, so not so many. Yes, so the maximum number of people in Mariupol now, Ukrainian people in the summer, it's 100,000 people. In autumn, I'm sure that we can see the much less people than in Mariupol, because they try to find something again, because of sea, lots of people back home in the summer season. So, but the sadness story is about Russian citizen in Mariupol. the Russian citizen Mariupol, for now, it's near the same numbers. So without any servicemen, in Mariupol, near the 80,000 people. So it's a lot. Lots of Russian removed to Mariupol because Margin program worked in Mariupol, and like Russian promoted this process, like removing. And actually, we have the special politic of Russian authority, of Russian government, and they want to change population in Mariupol. They want to change Ukrainian population to Russian population. And the sadness story, it's very successful action for Russian. What can I say? After this 3 years of occupation, they know what they do, and they absolutely clearly understand how they can do it, how they can absolutely change in population in Mariupol. Finally, we predict that if the occupation of Mariupol staying near the, 3 years, finally we have near the 20% it will be Ukrainian citizen, and near the 70-80% it might be Russian citizen. Original Russian, not like who take a Russian passport in Mariupol before had Ukrainian citizens. So it's very hard story. It's finally it's like the way from the history we can see it in Ukrainian history in the past century when the Soviet Union made the same things. But Soviet Union, I have to say that less successful in the stories than Russians for now.
Yes, as you said, the process of moving people from Russian Federation is working, and they are also using an important tool, which is the housing crisis. We see that there are not enough houses. A lot of people in Mariupol who lost their house, they're still homeless, and we also see an increasing number of new apartment buildings that are replacing the demolished ones. But however, these new blocks are being sold to Russians, and they are not accessible to the people who lost their homes. Could you please explain the process of giving nothing to Ukrainians, but selling these new buildings, new apartments to Russian? And can you also please, you had some numbers about how many apartments they plan to build, and compare that with the number of apartments that disappeared.
I think you know better than me how many apartments was disappeared. I know it, but near the half of 100 apartments, 100 buildings, they demolished after the occupation. So for us, it's easier to count by the apartments, because we have absolutely different buildings with different numbers of floor and some kind of that. So we can say that for now they demolished and disappeared near the 35,000 apartments in Mariupol, and near the same count of apartments, it's look like ruin. So it doesn't disappear for now, but in reality, it's impossible to live in. So it's absolutely ruined. So finally, we have near the 70,000 of apartments in reality disappeared in Mariupol for now. And what about the new apartments? I think we can say it about two parts. again at about two parts of the apartments, the two parts of the buildings. First of all, the apartments for Mariupol people, for compensation on this story. And we know they finished this process for now, absolutely. It's like final point from the 1st January of this year. So, and we can say they built near the 5,000 of apartments. So it's like less than 10% of all apartments they were demolished and destroyed in Mariupol now. So any new apartments, especially for Mariupol, Russian don't build now, and they like finalize this process for everyone. And in the same time, they're building a lot of apartments for Russians. So imagine system. For now, in the morning I check this for our analysis, one of our analysis, and I can say they announced 26 big apartments, big buildings with apartments for Russian people, and it's not the final point because we know that they have special papers in Donetsk for 20 new buildings too. So finally, they want to build during this year near the 46 new buildings for Russians. It's a big buildings, like it's not like skyscrapers, but we're very close for that. So every new buildings has more than 10 floor. So it's like a big buildings. Like so, but nobody. It's not for Ukrainian people for now. About our information, and near the 22,000 people who stay in Mariupol right now, they haven't any property, they haven't any apartment, so they really homeless for now. And they try to fight with Russian authority, but it's absolutely unsuccessful story. I'm shocked, and we're absolutely surprised why they stay in Mariupol without home. It's strange, really. It sounds strange, it looks strange, but it's true.
Yes, and about that, since the end of 2024, many videos have appeared online showing these people who, after 3 years, still have no home, and they are demanding a solution. They make appeals to Putin himself. And do you see any shift in the mindset of those people who were waiting for Russia?
Yeah, some, but I don't think it's like a big shifting, actually, because it's waiting of Russia from our view. I mean, like our in widest sense, like for Ukrainian views, it's very close to some, I don't know, some mental illness, because it's a strange. Really, we haven't any real understanding how it's possible. Yeah, Russian bomb like under your head, in your home, and you like think it's okay. It's a strange, really. It's strange. We saw it. I saw it a lot in Mariupol in previous year before the start in the Russian invasion, but after the starting of war, when they're shelling a big part of Mariupol, like our Schidny area, it's one of the biggest tragedy of Mariupol before the Russian invasion, I mean, in February 2022. So it's a strange. It's absolutely, we haven't any real point for understanding that. It's like, really, it's like mental illness. So we absolutely, we can see there any changes of pro-Russian Ukrainian citizen mind in the story. Other people who, like, under politic, yeah, they said we are under politic, so we were like we for peace, not for Russia, not for Ukraine. This part of society, yeah, they shift to pro-Ukrainian part because they see every day what is the real Russian world, yeah, Ruski Mir, what is that? So finally, yeah, they have a big hope in start of occupation, and in reality, Russian made lots of things that for this fairy tale of Russian world. But for now, after that, they see that nobody, no, they don't need for Russians. Yeah, Russia need a Mariupol, like logistic point, like port, like airport, like I don't know, army base, but not for Ukrainian civilian people inside in reality. And they understand and they think like more the pro-Ukrainian mind they have now, pro-Ukrainian opinion.
Yeah, when you describe Mariupol, I mean, if you see other occupied territories, they look even worse. Somehow they are working to give a good picture of Mariupol because it's important for their propaganda. But yeah, the reality is extremely bad. And going
Yeah,
back to those videos for a second, you said that they might be a part of a political plan by Oleg Morgun, who is the head of the occupiers' city administration. And apparently, those videos they stopped and then started again and then stopped again. And you said that perhaps FSB stopped them. What is happening? What is the political goal of Morgun? And can you explain? I know it's very complex, but it's also very interesting.
yeah, I try to explain it because, yeah, first of all, we need to we have to understand that any chief of occupied authority like Marhun or someone else, it's nobody for Russians because it's like it's a puppet, yeah, you know. So they can make any decision about Mariupol. Formally, he's a chief of Mariupol, he mayor of Mariupol, but in reality not. They have a special person from Russia, absolutely unpublic person, who decide everything about Mariupol. So we were talking about this strange process with Russian inside politic and strange process without our demolished houses and people who had homeless, how they use it. So it's very interesting story, and it's not stop. I can say yesterday. I start from yesterday. Yeah. First of all, and what can I say? Yesterday, someone from a Russian occupied authority or from Russian FSB sent for us, in our center, for our people, big base, big database of people who try to fight for their houses in Mariupol. I mean, someone hacked their gadgets, phones, like texting, email, all kind of the stuff, and send it for us because it's very interesting story. It's like a part of inside a war without people, FSB, and without Marhun. So what the Marhun want was one of the volunteer from Russia, some Madame Sani. They used our people for attack the Russian authority, I mean the Kremlin, first of all, and Putin administration. Sorry. Russian authority for, because they want to be a parliamenter, working parliament, be like senator in Russian parliament. So they use our people for that with the GRU, but it's an absolutely unsuccessful story finally. So finally FSB win this war and everybody shut up in Mariupol. Margun, all our people were prepared if they make the one more video, they will be arrested. So for now, this war like stopped. I mean, but what were the main idea? The main idea was lots of our people. Margun organized for our people, not like for his own, of course, but from his people in Mariupol. They organized a special video from these people, homeless people, first of all, and they talk to Putin and want to help from them about their apartments. They said a lot like Pushilin, Laya, and something like that. So finally, someone in Putin administration, it was Kirienko, it's deputy of chief of Putin administration in the Kremlin. They talked to Putin and said like, oh, you can see the Pushilin didn't do nothing. He's a thief, like just he stolen our budget money, all kind of this stuff. And yeah, it was like the worst time for Pushilin in the start of this year. But finally, for now, the FSB, I think they win the story because the FSB is behind the back of Pushilin, first of all. So strange story, but finally there's a sadness in the story because of our people. Our people stay homeless. Our people haven't any help. And for now, they predicted they can be arrested from FSB in any time for this video they made in January and in February.
Yeah, and I understood that the repression is still very hard, not only for those people who recorded the videos, but in general. And in your analysis about Mariupol, you describe the local economy as a bazaar. And when I look at Instagram, I think that the city seems to be filled with beauty salons and restaurants with occasional military personnel passing by. But of course, this one is a very distorted view. What are the people really living on? Both the original Mariupol people, you said most of them are old, retired people, and also the occupiers. What what's the economics of the city?
They haven't any economics, so absolutely no economics in the city. So in the city, the city live just from the Russian budget. They dotated Mariupol budget, and it's like final point. If we talk about like business, it's a short business. Yeah, it's some shops, like some stores, some cafe, some restaurants, but not a lot. And it's not like supermarket. Yeah, in civilization, it's like really small stores, like in the small town or small village, something like that. And it isn't enough for the people in Mariupol, but they haven't money for biggest business because every business controlled by Russian authority, it's very hard to understand. It's a big corruption inside. So, yeah, lots of these cafe and restaurants were opened in the first year of occupation. It's strange, but in reality, because on the first year, Mariupol had lots of money. It's like money from the air. It was, I don't know, golden age in the USA and something like that. But finally, it stopped in 2023, and for now, it's absolutely other story. Our people haven't any job. We haven't any industrial factory or something like that. Any big business and any, I don't know, nothing. It's just nothing. Mariupol works just support. And I mean, that's it. Actually, all these cafes, cafe for now, a restaurant, they really work for Russian servicemen. In Mariupol, for now, near the 15,000 of Russian servicemen, so they have money, and they spend their money in this restaurants, I mean. So it's not for Ukrainian, of course.
That's similar to my impression, and I see a lot of influencers, or I don't know, perhaps they are the wives or girlfriends of the servicemen. But
Yeah,
apart from that, I do not really see much of activity or economics in the city.
it's a
Finally,
dead city. No, for now, in reality, it's a dead city.
mm,
Absolutely. So I'm not sure that they can like rebuild it, or for now, I don't know. I'm not sure. So this city have like just one point for Russia, no 2 point. It's like war logistic and logistic to Crimea. So nothing, anything else. So it's not sounds like city for life. Yeah, it's like sounds for city for I don't know, like for the short stop between Russia territory and occupied Crimea.
yeah, I see sometimes tourists who are there, tourists from Russia, who are there for perhaps one day and then they go away. I don't even know if they're staying in the city for one night, to be honest. There is another topic that I find really disturbing, and is the indoctrination and militarization of children and youth. And I constantly see pictures and videos of the children of all ages, from 3 years old and up over, being exposed not just to Russian propaganda, but to military rhetoric, imagery, systematic indoctrination, and
Yeah.
even paramilitary trainings. And I believe that many people in the West don't fully grasp what this could mean in the future not so far away. It's really scary. So could you please talk about this?
Yeah. I think uh, for our mind. First of all, it's working. First of all, we have to understand it's really working, because from the first day of occupation, not from first day, yeah, but from the first months of occupation, they started this program. They started to work just with our children, because they understood that very clear story. So it's absolutely they don't work with adults, because for every adults in Mariupol or other occupied territory, it's like the people who have a potential dangerous people for Russian regime. It doesn't matter. They have a pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian views, minds. They think it's dangerous. It's why they try to change our citizens for Russian citizens. But with the children and absolutely other situations, they clearly understand that they can restudy or relearn our people and remake from Ukrainian children to the Russian citizens, and not just like Russian citizens, Russian soldiers first of all. And they've done they're doing the same thing in occupied territory in Russia, and they are future soldiers. In reality, it's future soldiers who will fight with European Union first of all after 5 years. I don't know, 6 years might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less, but they were prepared. They built like absolutely a special bubble, for our children. They have a special program for education. It's not like education, but it's more like military patriotic education, they think. The chief of that, it's Maria Lvova Belova. It's Russian children ombudsman. It's very strange for sounds, yeah, but it's reality. And Kirienko, the deputy of chief administration of president of Russia. So, and they work with our people, and yes, they know what they do, and it might be working. What can I say? I learned in Soviet Union school. In the high school, we had near the same classes of war education. It was very funny, but it's not like that. It's very light version of reality of modern time. And I said it works in the past, but it was like final years of Soviet Union. So for now, it might be working better, and they understand every mistake of Soviet Union regime in education and with work with the children, and they correct it. So they have a we have a really sad story. So it might be thousands future warriors now in the Russian school and in a school in occupied territory. They very successful in this story. It's very sad to say that, but it's reality. If we, I don't know what we can do, but we have to do something. I mean, not like just Ukrainian or not just like Ukraine. With our alias, we have to do something. We have work with, I don't know, we have to work with social media. We have make lots of content. We have make a gaming, all kind of that our children use. Because the children in occupied territory in Russia, and the same children like in every world, they use a gadget, they use, they like games, plays, comics, I don't know. All kind of this stuff, and we have to do something with that in the widest meaning. I mean, not just like we for our people, for our children in occupation, because here, absolutely sure, and I think everybody have to be absolutely sure that after 5 years, Russia had 100,000 of new warriors, new soldiers. And what the difference from now? For now, they have to pay for their soldiers lots of money, yeah, because it's one of motivation to go into the war. In the future, not. All these people, all these children, when they stay adult, they have other motivation. They think they are like Russian patriot against all the world, because all the world is the world of the enemies for the Russian. It's awful. It's awful as for me, and it's scary. It have to scare it everyone in civilian war for now. I mean, first of all, in European Union countries and countries through the border of Russia, and Baltic countries, Scandinavian countries, Poland, all kind of these countries. And I know the Scandinavian, the first of all, Baltic countries, they understand it, because they were like part of Soviet Union in the past. They were occupied of Soviet Union. They remember at the time, like in the Ukrainian people, they remember the time. So, but I'm sure that it's very strange to understand. I know, like in Norway, yeah, for now. In the or other country as you want, in France, I don't know, Belgium, the Netherlands, any countries. It's very strange to believe for now that it can be possible in the future. But what can I say? When in 2021, every Ukrainian, everybody thinks the same. It was strange, it's impossible that Russian made an invasion in Mariupol, in Ukraine. They destroyed our peaceful cities, all kind of the stuff. So nobody believed, nobody, and Europe now in the same situation. Nobody believe, but they have to. And you have to, because it can be. It's reality. Russians don't think like they haven't a normal thinking, yeah, like ordinary people, like humanitarian people. No, they have absolutely other kind of thinking. It's absolutely, I don't know. It's not like an animal, because animal the best than Russia, you know.
Okay, so I have a final question for you. Last year, we concluded our interview and I asked you your thoughts about the future, and I would like to do the same again. Now, the current situation is highly unpredictable due to the US administration shift to support the Russian narrative. So, given such uncertainty, how do you see the future of occupied territories, and what is the general sentiment among the people who are living under the occupation?
Yeah, it's for now it's very hard to predict something because of Trump, of course, in reality. But I try. We, Ukraine, for now, in the point, if we stay strong through the 2025, In 2026, we can think about the occupation of our territory. In reality, because Russia have a big problem with everything, with armor, with vehicle, with people. First of all, it's really strange, but they absolutely in that point. It's not our luck for now with Trump administration because of I think everybody understands what I mean. But for now, I think if we haven't peace deal this year. I don't believe in peace deal this year, of course. But if we haven't peace deal in 2026, we can talk about the occupation of our territory. If we must to peace deal, as for me, our territory stayed occupied some years before we can deoccupy it in different ways. I'm not sure about way how we deoccupate it. Might be it like I don't know about Berlin Wall. Might be it could be like a war story like in Armenia, Azerbaijan for now in Nagorno Karabakh. I mean, like in the army way. So I don't know for now, but yeah, it's like a question, big question for now, big issue. If so if we haven't a peace deal, I sure that 2026 it might be start the year of our victory, and we can talk about the occupation and in different ways, not just diplomatic. I mean, it might be absolutely boots on the ground in occupied territory, Ukrainian boots, first of all. So who knows? Because lots of process around, not just the USA administration, lots of things in Europe. I think it's very good things that Europe finally understand that they for their own. So nobody helps Europe in any war, any NATO or something like that. So Europe for Europe might be, and it's our chance, Ukrainian chance to deoccupy it with the European support. Why not? Who said
Yeah,
not? So
I totally agree with you. I believe that now Europe really has to step up together with Ukraine and Ukraine together with Europe.
yeah,
That's for the good of the whole continent. So thank you very much for having been with us today. And I hope to talk with you soon again. And Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Petro.
Yeah, it was super interesting, Alex. Thank you so much.
In my own opinion, it's all interesting, but the final 2 minutes are super inspiring because, especially for those of us who are living in Europe, they tell everything. It's like, it's the future of Europe, and we have been saying the same for 3 years now. Ukraine and Europe. And Erlend, you know better than me.
Yeah, this guy needs more eyes on his work and his knowledge. So thank you
Mm.
so much for bringing him on here, and also I know that you're in some way collaborating with him. So
Yes,
thank
I
you
do.
for the work you're doing. There were some questions about where people can get news from
Yes.
Mariupol.
So I know that you have already put a few channels in the video description, and I'm going to explain those. So the first one is Petro's own Telegram channel, which is of course in Ukrainian, but it's very easy to translate, and I've been following for a couple of years now. That's perhaps my main source. It's not always easy to understand if you are not really into the local news and if you do not speak Ukrainian or Russian, which I do not, but still I'm able to make a decent work about the occupied territories. So it's possible. So the first link is Petro's own channel. The second one in the video description is the channel for Mariupol resistance, which is very close to Petro. And okay, most of the time they are showing people who are pro-Russian in the city, but they also share some interesting information which is not just relevant for people very close to Mariupol, but about um, the occupied territories or local news, stuff like that. So it's a very good channel. Then the third link that you put in the description is the 0629 is the Telegram channel. They also have a website. Is the local news site for Mariupol. It's pro Ukraine. It's a very good one for me because they cover a lot of news from the city, and they also have lots of YouTube videos. Of course, they are in Ukrainian, so it requires some work to translate them, but I really appreciate the work they are doing. And then there is the main local Telegram channel, which is Mariupol now. They became really huge during the siege of the city. I don't remember how many subscribers they have, but it's around 300,000. And my own comment about that channel is that they're very good to collect information from multiple sources. Unfortunately, they are infiltrated by a lot of pro-Russian people, perhaps FSB, I guess. So if you read the channel, do not look at the reactions, because you will see that if you remember the videos we made last year when I was speaking and showing my map, and I was saying that Russians, they're not really rebuilding the city, but they're just repainting the city. And these trolls in that local channel, they really like to put likes on anything that is repainted, not really rebuilt, but repainted. So it's, yeah, the Russian propaganda everywhere. But yeah, again, it's a good source because they gather. Oh, thank you for putting my map on screen. So if and I can explain the map for 2 seconds. So Mariupol now is a good channel, but you have to filter a little bit, especially the reactions. So I will spend 2 minutes on the map. And Erden, are you on control of the screen so I can?
Yes.
Okay. So okay. First of all, the map. I started that in January 24, and it's in Italian because, as you hear, I'm from Italy, and it was a reaction against Italian propagandists for Russia, and they wanted to have an event in Italy to tell everybody that Mariupol was rebuilt, which I knew was not true. So I started with this project where I'm mapping pictures and videos of the city, mainly pictures. So there are several layers. Now you are going to 2022, I think. Okay, so that one, you are now showing the new buildings. So those, the purple icons with the Russian bear foot stamp, are the buildings that Russian have built after the occupation. So those where you are now is the Nevsky complex, which is the first complex they built. It's the one that Putin visited in late 23, I think, late at night. And if you click on the yeah, you see on the left, if you click there, you will see the pictures. There is a picture for every single icon, at least one. So if you click there on the picture on the left, you will see, because on Google Maps, you don't see that, but now there is a building there. But on the other hand, if you click on the red icons on the right-hand side, like that one, for example, and you click there on the left-hand side of your screen, yeah, there, you see there is no buildings there anymore. So as Petro said during the interview, the Russians have demolished almost 500 blocks. So we are not talking about houses, but we are talking about huge buildings, like from 4 floors up to 12. There is nothing left. So on each icon, if you click on the left-hand side, you got the picture. So you can, as you can see. Now, perhaps I don't know if anyone noticed during the interview, I said that now they're really, I have to admit, they're really rebuilding a lot. But none of the buildings that they are building now are for Ukrainians who lost their houses. It's just for Russians. And you know, the interest rate in Russia is 21%, the basic interest rate, while in Mariupol, they will get the mortgage for 2%, which is nothing. Not even in Europe is it's anything. It's incredible. It's because they want to displace the people. They want to colonize Mariupol and have Russians there. So in the future, when Ukraine will advance, they will say, "No, this is full of Russians. So what are you doing?" Right? You know the rhetoric. And so I've got different layers on the map. Those snow stars in blue, it's because last autumn, between October and that's the only layer without pictures. It's because last autumn, between October and November, you know, in Mariupol they had a centralized heating system, but people on Russian channels, which are not in the description tonight, they were complaining that they had not heat in their homes. So temperature outside was like 0 degrees Celsius, and their houses were at the same temperature because the heating system was not working. So I tried to collect the data from the Telegram channels and collect the addresses. So I believe I put around 50 blocks in the map. There were a few more, but yeah, each one of those snow stars in the map is a huge block of people who were freezing during autumn and winter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
your map is really an important resource and documentation of what is going on.
Oh,
So
thank you, Erlend. I just want to highlight one thing. If you go to the right and you see all those red icons, if you zoom in there, look at that. So that area is called Stadium. It's quite close to Azovstal, which is on the left-hand side. And all those red icons there are demolished buildings. There is nothing left. Russians have not started to build anything yet in that area. And yeah, that's the only, the one that you click on, the blue icon, is a shop. And that's the only building left. But it's terrible. So you see, we got 47 apartments, nothing is left. And people, even pro-Russians who were living there, are pissed off. Now you went to the 2023 layer, I think. That one was a high building. Now it's also demolished. You see the red icon next to it. And that building, you had the Kadyrov people, the snipers from Kadyrov, who were trying to shoot against Azovstal, but yeah, nothing is left of any of that. So it's dramatic. I mean, I really feel bad many of the time that I update my map.
Understandable.
And to be honest, I one day was commenting live with Petro because we speak almost every day, or we chat almost every day. And one day I said, it's so bad for me that I really cannot understand how bad can it be for a person like you who lived, was born, grew up, and lived in the city, and now everything is gone. And now everything is changing. It's terrible. And again, the final point, though, that I want to say is that we also said during the interview that the other cities that Russians destroyed and occupied, there is nothing left. But for Mariupol, it's different because that's like a showcase for their propaganda. So they want to say that they're rebuilding it, and they're doing it. As I said, it's not for local people anymore, but they're creating a different city. The buildings are different. They're bigger. Can I say they're really Russian? If you understand what I mean.
Yeah,
It's
they're
another city.
Russifying the city, and
Yeah, so
both
they're
with
they're
yeah, but
canceling what it was before. It's not going to be the same. And even if I'm not from the city myself, I've never been there, but I can imagine one day when the city will be free again, how it can be for one person who gets back to the city. Everything is changed. So they're erasing their lives once more.
yeah,
It's terrible.
they're trying to change everything and change out people and brainwash the children. It's really an ongoing genocide actually
It
happening,
is. It is.
because when you are trying to erase culture, uh, national identity of the people that are there, then that that is classified as a genocide.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And
Okay.
one final thing is that a couple of weeks ago there was a good article from BBC about Mariupol, about how Russians are stealing properties, which we discussed during the interview tonight. And I be, I was reading that article once more tonight before we went live, and something doesn't make sense to me because it appears that BBC is not really counting the people who died in Mariupol. It appears that they're just talking about people who left the city during the siege, but nobody knows how many people died. And the estimate of Petro and his team is about 55,000, which is a bit conservative because I have seen bigger estimates, but I want to stand with these numbers because it makes sense in some way. But remember that 55,000 people who died in Mariupol in 86 days is more than 10% of the population of the city.
Yeah, I guess it's going to be hard to get a true number. Not sure what methods they are using. If it's conservative, I would say um, it is still very, very high. We've seen estimates of up to 100 and 120,000 as well. But
So we have seen that around 22,000 is confirmed, but it means that it's before when Russian took occupation of the old city, and then after more or less the early March or mid March 22, we have no clue. and then they
Yeah.
made a lot of people disappear.
Yeah.
Even when they demolished the buildings, and there is I'm unable to show that picture right now, but they've got a huge dump of debris in the heart of the city. Most of the people in Mariupol, they say, okay, it's not just the houses, but it's also the corpses. So we will never know.
Yeah, and there's a big disconnect, in my opinion, in the media when people are talking about casualties in Ukraine, where they don't count the deaths in Mariupol, probably because there is no verified, internationally recognized casualty number of civilians there, which is
Yeah. No, I agree
very,
with
very
you. And
problematic.
even last week, I believe there was some kind of official statement about, or 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure, about a official statement about civilian casualties during the conflicts, and it was so low that it was, of course, just Mariupol itself. It was like at least 3 times bigger than that, and I was reading with that one, and I was commenting with Petro. And, what is that? Oh, sorry, I'm really feeling all this very close.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this interview and the information that you're collecting about Mariupol.
Thank you, Erlend, for
It's
the
very,
space.
very important. So, I guess we're gonna move on. I think Joseph you have some extra bits.
I do, Erlend. The bits that didn't make it into the news presentation this week. Just some general stuff. So I'll start with, I guess, like the simplest one. Sorry, I put them out of order, Erlend. There were some energy talks between the Ukrainian and U.S. ministers of energy. Normally, I wouldn't comment on just some like low-level talks between some energy people. That happens between European countries and Ukraine all the time. But for the US, it's kind of significant because, as far as I know, it's the first like major discussion that we've seen between the US and Ukraine about protecting Ukraine's energy infrastructure since the Trump administration came into office. Basically, there were programs in place to have the US support Ukrainian protection and rebuilding of energy infrastructure that were sort of like cut and withdrawn as part of USAID stuff. And since then, we haven't really seen any like movement on that issue. So obviously not like a huge deal to have low-level talks between ministers, but just to see a little movement like that is, I guess, a little bit encouraging. So yeah, we'll just take that good news for what it is. Then the next item, I guess, would be more in order, which is Moscow Times released an article this week, which I think is reasonably logical or like makes sense to me. Obviously, we're engaging into Kremlinology here, trying to look into the cloudy crystal ball that is the Russian political elite and, of course, the guy at the top. But I think it's a reasonably, I don't know, like insightful take on what's going on. And it reflects what my understanding of like Russian foreign policy goals have been for a long time in Russian discourse. And that is the Russians have talked for decades at this point, basically since September 11th, about what they call like a new Yalta, which is like the idea that the US will come sit down with them again, like at Yalta, and sort of divide up, Europe. And that's something that Putin has, I would say, thought actively pursued. He's never used the term New Yalta, but that's something that the Russian elite use to talk about this idea. And I would say historically, Putin has attempted to pursue that strategy, or at least in their like words, he's done so by effectively like distracting the U.S. or like causing problems for the U.S. And the sort of approach has been stick their nose in a bunch of U.S. business, for example, like Syria, and just cause as many problems as possible. And basically tell the US, like, we know you need to focus on China. if you make a deal with us, like we'll stop bothering you, right? That's kind of been their like strategy for a long time. I would say that their leverage has like decreased in recent times, so their approach has shifted a little bit, but the fundamental strategy seems to be the same. And it's been tailored a little bit specifically more towards Trump, which is this idea of like a more like basically a larger discussion about a larger deal. So that kind of leads into the article that was released this week, and it's basically like, what is their strategy dealing with Trump right now? What is this Witkoff guy talking to Trump about in all these stupid meetings, right? So Moscow's preparing for these larger negotiations, mainly between Putin and Trump directly, and what's on their mind seems to be something larger than Ukraine, and it's not clear how much of that is like actually their real strategy, like they really want something bigger than Ukraine from the US, versus they're doing that in order to make Ukraine seem like a smaller issue for the US, right? Oh, just concede a few points on Ukraine and then we'll make this bigger deal with you, right? Something like that. So that seems to be, I think, what this article is saying that they're trying to do. So to entice, the Trump administration and the U.S., they're offering incentives focused on rare earths, energy cooperation, things like Putin's visiting Washington, reviving the Trump Tower Moscow project, various corporate deals between Russian and U.S. companies, right? Like things that they see as things that Trump would like. And it's described in the article as like quick, flashy, media-friendly achievements that can be completed within a single presidential term. So offering him very like short-term, but like broad things that he would like personally. And then Ukraine's viewed as Russia's main bargaining chip. They hope to use the possibility of a ceasefire to extract concessions. And, they think that maybe they can use this broader deal as part of a way to get some concessions from the U.S. on Ukraine, particularly limiting U.S. military aid in the future. And then the article kind of concludes, which I think is accurate, that despite this strategy and despite their efforts, their real leverage to offer the U.S. a deal is quite limited. Their trade with the U.S. is and always has been minimal. We're like sort of competitors in a lot of areas more than like trade partners. Influence over areas where once they had a little bit more influence, I think they've lost influence. Those main areas are in Syria, right? They had a lot more influence before. And also because of Syria, also with Iran, they had some more influence that they lost as a result. Like they've lost considerable leverage with Iran since the full-scale invasion started. And also North Korea, right? North Korea's gained a lot of leverage on them. So historically, Russia's been able to put leverage on those guys and get more concessions out of the U.S., but now their ability to do that is more limited because their leverage, the equation has been changing. North Korea and Iran have been helping them. So who are they to go to them now and ask for favors, right? So that's the issue for Russia. They don't really have much to offer the U.S. Ultimately, their plan hinges on keeping Trump engaged personally and offering him these high-profile, low-effort victories and trying to kind of rebuild his trust and patience and relations with the Trump administration personally. It's not a good long-term plan, but it might work kind of in the shorter medium term. So that was kind of the broad strokes of the article. If anyone has any thoughts or comments on it, I think it was like pretty reasonable in its assessment and its conclusions. But if you guys have any thoughts or objections or whatever you want to say, go ahead.
No, not really. I mean, trying to convince Trump with Trump things, I guess.
Yeah, I will say that the Russians seem to know how to talk to Trump in certain ways. They seem to have channels to Trump that other countries don't, things like that. So, I mean, this seems to be their best shot at some kind of plan. So we'll see how it shakes out. Another development that I didn't cover in the main news because it's just talk and I don't like to cover that in the main news. Russia said they were ready basically for higher level negotiations or at least direct negotiations with Ukraine. As we know, recently they've been claiming that they've liberated the Kursk region. However, Erlend, maybe I can ask you, as far as I understand, that's basically not true. Like there is geolocated data that shows Ukrainian forces are still active, at least on some small level in the Kursk region, as well as in the Belgorod region. So this idea that the Russians have completely expelled the Ukrainians, it's just kind of one of those things. And I think they've claimed this multiple times at this point. But this week they said finally, we've expelled all the Ukrainian invaders from Kursk and blah blah blah. But go ahead.
Not only that, Gerasimov did something that is super interesting because he basically thanked the North Koreans for
Yeah.
being fundamental in helping the Russians expelling Ukraine from the what he called an invasion into Russia, which was of course kind of big news that Gerasimov said this, I would say, because they've claimed they denied everything that
Yeah.
had to do with North Koreans in fighting in this war.
This is
and
the
also
first official confirmation from the Russians that the North Koreans have been militarily involved. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and also like they were very careful about mentioning whatever was happening in Kursk as invasion into Russia. They would say this is like terrorists and inside our country, or security problems. But yeah, so typical Russian communication. Gerasimov here being very frank compared to what we've seen from the Russian authorities before, I would say. That's
If
the
I
video, by the way, where he's
can
saying
add
this stuff.
something. You know,
Yep.
you got Andriushchenko, the Italian propagandist. He's been denying all the time until yesterday that there were any North Koreans fighting for Russia. And then Gerasimov came into the picture and denied that himself. It's quite surprising.
Yeah, it's very surprising the way he's doing it, but they're was framing it as like the framework of security cooperation with North Korea has developed. It's very Russian, anyways.
Yeah. They laid all the official groundwork for this. They did all the state visits and shook all the hands and, visited the palace of the North Koreans and all that and made declarations and signed treaties.
I mean, it's a lot more honest and I would say makes a lot more sense than anything from their propaganda. Like Gerasimov is here just doing what any military leader would do in communicating the actual relationship with North Korea that they have, which is true, right? Like they did everything, all those diplomatic steps and handshakes, and we know that the Russians have unfortunately transferred technology to the North Koreans as well, in exchange for probably munitions and these people.
Yeah, like we definitely have proof that the North Koreans have sent millions of shells to Russia. We have proof of their soldiers fighting. Like we have obvious footage of that. We have photographs of like with Russian units. We have possible evidence this week, which I don't have an article for, but I remember the president mentioned of Ukraine that there's possibly a North Korean missile fired, and they're going to take a closer look at it and see. And of course, also North Korean artillery pieces have been sent to Ukraine to fight, or sorry, to Kursk. So that's like you said, it's there's obvious proof of all this stuff. But I did want to ask you about the actual like liberation of Kursk, because you're more on the geo side of things than me. Like we know we covered, I think, a few weeks ago, like obviously the main operation of Kursk is over. Like there was collapse might be a strong word, but there was a strategic withdrawal from Kursk by the Ukrainians after the position became sort of untenable. They couldn't get supplies to the troops on the main roads. But as far as I understand, the data I've seen from the people I am aware of like there are still some activities going on by the Ukrainians on the Kursk side of the border, and for Russia to say like it's completely 100% cleared and that Kursk is like now totally clear is incorrect. So I don't know if you could just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, but for all like in purposes, military purposes, they've succeeded in expelling the Ukrainians, I would say, in the sense that yes, there are geolocated footage of Ukraine still fighting in some of these areas, but I would say that's in the border areas, right? They don't have any towns, villages under control anymore. So, I mean, it's not that wrongful to claim that they've successfully expelled Ukraine here.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely more plugged into that side of things than me. So,
I mean,
but yeah,
it
that's
is
something
true.
that
Like, you're right. Like they didn't expel them out of all of the border areas, etc. But I'm just saying,
Right.
it's the military operation inside Kursk is by and large, over from the Ukrainian side.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Like the main thrust of the operation is over. This what is happening now appears to be just like the Ukrainians like, making sure that it costs to take territory if they're able to do that, right? Which, makes sense.
It's tactically not, but they're keeping tactical positions basically.
Right.
They're not. It wouldn't make sense to retreat to the border again, because some of these positions that they have are better than staying at the border. So that's basically why they're still there, I think.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So that's pretty much that piece of news. And then I did want to talk to you, Erlend, while we're talking a little bit about just the UK's peacekeeper talk this week. Back in February, like all these headlines from all these countries, oh, peacekeeping force, we're going to keep peacekeepers on the border. And like, Erlend being a military mind of decent quality took one look at that and said, well, I see a gigantic border here. It's going to take 100,000 soldiers. That means we're going to have to rotate them. So that means you're going to have to triple that. So 300,000 soldiers. We don't have 300,000 soldiers. And even if we did, putting 100,000 soldiers in Ukraine means people are going to die. Like there's going to be accidents. Like we saw recently, there were 4 U.S. soldiers who tragically died in Lithuania. Like you have accidents like that happening just normally. This is a place where there's landmines and drones and missiles and you're going to have accidents and, quote unquote escalation if that's what they're afraid of. So this was pretty patently obvious to Erlend. He wrote an article about it that I think was pretty straightforward. And it's just so crazy to me that all these public promises were made back then, and no one seems to have informed the people who are making those promises of what the actual plan would entail in terms of what capabilities and costs it would require. And now they're speaking a little bit more reasonably, I would say, which we can talk about next. But I think first, Erlend, I think is now you're a very humble man and you would never do this, but I'm giving you the opportunity to gloat a bit, to say you were right, and then just talk about maybe some of these comments that have been made this week.
Yeah. So when I wrote that article, one of the reasons why I did it was to kind of make people, or I wanted to make people aware that Ukraine, of course, was demanding or saying we need at this and this and this for a peacekeeping force to be actually something that we can trust as a security guarantee, which I absolutely agree on. Like they want a tripwire force because they don't feel like 15,000 soldiers being deployed somewhere in Western Ukraine doing some training missions is going to be any security guarantee for them at all. Like from what I've understood, they perceive that as a positive thing, but they don't perceive it as a security guarantee. Of course, they would like it still. So I just had to look at the whole kind of peacekeeping mission within what Ukraine said is the minimum necessary, and that would be a tripwire force. So a force that is deployed along the front lines, either mixed with Ukrainians or maybe deployed together with Ukrainians in some fashion, right? Working independently or integrated into their brigade systems. Because that would basically mean if Russia crossed the border or the new not the border, but the front lines, frozen front lines at any point in time, that would immediately put the security forces that Europe would contribute to Ukraine in war with Russia. So that would force us to react, which of course is what Ukraine wants, because that would feel a lot more secure than just having some guys deployed in Western Ukraine that can easily just leave the country if something happens, right? And I just see it as completely impossible. Like, we don't have the forces to do it, and also, or mainly, I don't think any country in Europe are going to be willing to do it, because what has happened now probably is that the politicians have given a mission to the military to evaluate what they can do, and they've come back and said, yeah, we can do this and this and that, and these are the security implications, like these are the risks, and they've probably said, we're gonna lose people there, people are gonna die, and now they're saying we're not so interested in doing that.
Daniela, go ahead.
Hello, hi to everyone. Good evening. I would like to just add something to what Erlend said. I totally share most of the discussion that Erlend brilliantly detailed, but I also want to warn everyone about the article on Politico, which essentially contains nothing than misleading title, because Luke Pollard, for who doesn't know very well, is a very good politician in UK, and has been a very good spokesman for the Minister of Defense. He has been able to dodge and also reply to very harsh question from Times, from BBC and many others news outlet. So his reply, and is available also the full episodes from on Times Radio on YouTube. He is not saying that Britain is not going to do that, but what he's trying to do is trying to not essentially do the same mistake that, for example, the Trump administration have done with the Russian during negotiation. Because at the moment, it's of course, for what Erlend has said, there is still the idea that for this mission, in case to be successful, then there is the need of a backstop from US. And so what UK is trying to do is trying to pressure as much as possible the White House and Trump to try to sponsor this, essentially, to make it less impossible, let's say. So the way on how he replied essentially is not saying it's not going to happen in any case, even if Trump is not going to do this, but is trying to leverage on that point. So that's a political and a negotiation tactics on how he replied to that. Now, on the specific regards on what will happen and the technicality, I totally agree with Erlend. I don't like this idea of a peacekeeping mission, and also because I don't think that there will be any peace to be held. And also because this type of mission will pose a very high risk with a very low capability of gaining anything, and we will not have the escalation ladder on our side. Instead, we'll still on the Russian side, which can decide at any point to use a heavy weapon on our troops. That's my point, because Politico has been very much distorting reality since this war started. Has produced very good pieces, but a lot of doubtful interpretation of reality. And I have seen many press conference with Luke Pollard, and he is amazing in his job. And his reply was very much political to try to evade more question about the topic, because there are negotiations around this with the White House for sure, and also in Europe.
Yes, but and I totally agree with your point on this specific comment. But you and me know both that unless the U.S. will do some sort of backstop or supply Europe with additional weaponry, especially munitions for our air forces, there is basically no way we would be able to pose a real, true security guarantee in Ukraine. So I would say Politico is not, they're not hitting the nail, but the reality is that without the US, we're not able to pose a big enough threat to Russia inside Ukraine, in my opinion. So it's a very big issue, in my opinion, that we're not realistic about this stuff. I'm happy that there are talks about deploying troops to Ukraine, because I truly think we should do it as soon as possible, but not as a peacekeeping mission, but as a signal towards Ukraine that we are going to stand there with them, and also because we really need to train more Ukrainians, and I think that more Ukrainians would want to sign up for the military if we place a fairly large contingent somewhere in the Western Ukraine, basically only for training purposes, but also as a morale boost. And I know that you agree with me on this point, but and I've talked to some people that have been on the meeting in Paris, for instance, that was only the military people that were having some preliminary talks after one of those famous Macron meetings, and they said we are really like in the very, very early stages of just finding out the possibilities of what we can do militarily. There is no real mission on the table right now.
No,
Yeah, I think
I totally agree. I totally agree, and I think that the main point is that the politicians do not have the understand, not because they are stupid, but they then don't have the information and the understanding of what type of capability at the moment the all military in Europe have for a purely land-based operation in Ukraine. Because if you think about the UK now is deploying a very large mission with the 2025 carrier strike group. This has been a very gigantic effort for the Royal Navy after many, many years. And for now, it's been successful. But this is just a tiny, tiny thing if you compare to the amount of resources, logistic, and all the infrastructure that needs to go in a large operation in Ukraine. So I think even these articles from Politico, it's just speculative. This is my point is all through the article, not the entire environment, which I 100% agree with what you say.
My point is that whatever Europe would be able to put on the ground in Ukraine would be purely symbolic, and I think that is actually going to be increasing the risk that we will have a larger conflict somewhere else in Europe, where involving Russia. I think that it's going to be, the Russians are just going to look at it and say like that's ridiculous, and we know that it's not going to actually pose a significant security guarantee for Ukraine. Let them have that puny thing there in Lviv or wherever it's going to be. This is actually to our benefit to have these guys there. So that's my view on these kind of talks. On the other hand, if we just deploy them now, I think it's completely the opposite effect. I think it would scare the Russians a little bit, and also it would boost Ukraine's morale significantly. So I think the pretext for the whole deploying soldiers to Ukraine is the wrong one. And I'm also almost 100% sure that it's never going to happen in a peacekeeping framework. We just don't have the troops, and we don't have the munitions for our air force to pose a significant threat to the Russians.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, Erlend, that like it's been counterproductive to conflate the idea of boots on the ground with like a security guarantee or a peacekeeping force. Like that has been counterproductive. I think in the past, when we were dealing with stuff involving helping Ukraine, we had this like weird, we were taking like steps and steps. It was like, well, can we send them tanks? Are we allowed to? Oh, someone sent them tanks. Now everyone can't, it's like sort of that kind of game. And I think that it was much better served when this idea of sending Western troops to Ukraine was just one of those things versus this like big peacekeeping mission. Because as you said, like there are real reasons we should probably send, a force to Ukraine. I think the two main reasons are, number one, Europe does have a huge refugee population of Ukrainians who were like forced out of the country. And to have just an area of Ukraine that says, it's under protection. Like we're going to not let missiles land here. That could really be a big deal for countries like Poland or other countries that have proposed this, Romania, that, like we could send in some kind of peacekeeping force under the UN to build some kind of a protective zone. The other obvious reasoning would be what you said, like training. There's good reasons to do it there. The issue is neither of those are security guarantees, right? Those are more just like, one is sort of a humanitarian gesture, maybe an economic gesture. The other one is more of like a helpful gesture to their military, but not a security guarantee for Ukraine. So that leaves us to like, what are security guarantees for Ukraine? That's kind of the crux of the matter, right? That's what the president of Ukraine is always talking about, that like these peace negotiations are all good, but there's no security guarantee. And the US isn't offering real security guarantees. And that's why we're seeing all of this like shuffling around, right? So I think there's like four paths that I can think of, Erlend, and you can maybe add or subtract whatever you want. The first, from like highest to lowest, Ukraine joins NATO. That would be the like highest level of security guarantee for Ukraine. I think that's what most Ukrainians would want in a perfect world. The second highest would be Ukraine gets like Israel treatment, and this is something Zelensky has explicitly called it. But I think the idea in general is like, it gets special guarantees from a country like the US that we've got their back, something like that, right? And then the third model would be an EU guarantee of some kind. You've already outlined all the problems with that, but at the end of the day, if Europe really gets its act together and can figure out in the next year or two how to guarantee Ukrainian security meaningfully, that's an option, right? And then the fourth is like just heavily funding the Ukrainian military to protect themselves. Something like Israel treatment light, right? There's no like real security guarantees for Ukraine, but they at least give the Ukrainian military enough support that they're able to porcupine their way out of fighting Russia again, right? So those are like the four options. Obviously, the fourth is like the least tolerable for Ukraine, but might work maybe as a security guarantee. So I don't know. What do you think about all that, Erlend? Like, are those the options on the table here? That seems to be the crux of the matter, eh?
Yeah, and I think that the most probable one, unfortunately, is the fourth, that Europe is going to, try and increase production and capabilities to prop up the Ukrainian military as much as possible, so that Russia will feel basically scared of Ukraine. But the problem here is how much time is that going to take? I would say it would take maybe 5 to 10 years. It's not within the time frame that we are looking at when it comes to when is Russia likely going to attack again if there is any sort of ceasefire. And honestly, because of what has happened the last 3 months since Trump took office, I think that any sort of ceasefire in the nearest future the probability of that happening has significantly been reduced. Also because Ukraine has, to a certain degree, been able to strengthen their military. And at least my perception is that even though people in Ukraine might not be very content at all with any of the situation, they are definitely very nervous about the international security, that is the state of international security and geopolitics in general. But the morale has in some way been increased in the sense that there seems to be more people that want to continue to fight at any cost as a reaction to some of what has happened, and one of them being the famous Oval Office incident, I think. So I just honestly don't see any ceasefire possibilities within the next couple of years.
Yeah, I think we both share the opinion that the ceasefire itself, while it's important, like I think, I don't know if I would necessarily agree that we all want a ceasefire. Like it would be, I would rather have Ukraine reclaim their territory and get properly armed and all that. But at the end of the day, like if a ceasefire happens, let's say it's a thing and it's a reality now, but that doesn't really change the fact that Ukraine needs a security guarantee, right? Like the ceasefire is a piece of paper. As you said, the Russians have every incentive to continue pursuing their goals, and their military is going to be stronger than Europe until Europe really changes course here. So, Ukraine still stands as the main obstacle to their goals. I'll put it that way. And then, Ukraine still needs a security guarantee, even with a ceasefire in place. That's kind of the bottom line here, is what I'm getting at. And so the minute the ceasefire is signed, we now move to the real question. Okay, how do we enforce that ceasefire? What is the security guarantee mechanism for Ukraine? So the ceasefire is, I would argue, like separate to the security guarantee, which is the real issue. If we had a security guarantee tomorrow for Ukraine, the ceasefire would probably be more possible, right? I think that's like the ceasefire is the center of gravity here. The security guarantee is the center of gravity here. Everything else is kind of peripheral to it, I think.
Yeah, the problem is that Europe is not able to or willing to spend what is needed to increase production capabilities and also various technological abilities fast enough. So Ukraine will not have any security guarantees from Europe that they will perceive as enough, I think. And when we look at what the US is saying and communicating about their intentions, it certainly doesn't seem like they are willing to either supply weaponry that would be, for instance, like Zelensky said, give me 1,000 Tomahawks. That's going to be something that we will appreciate as a big step towards security guarantees. And the US said, absolutely not, right? So if we don't see any signs of the US being willing to completely change their intentions here, it's going to be very, very hard for Ukraine to accept any sort of ceasefire with what Europe has pledged to Ukraine right now, and also what Europe is capable of. And Ukraine is also very well aware of the European military capabilities. And I don't want to say that our militaries are less strong than Russia's. That's not what I'm trying to say here. It's just we're not able to deploy to Ukraine what would be strong enough for Ukraine to accept as a security guarantee over time. Like we could probably mass significant forces in a crisis or war situation, which would be more than enough. But we're talking about a mission that would last maybe 5-10 years here, and that's not something we are able to deploy right now.
Yeah, I think obviously like Europe's population, military potential, industrial power, economic power, like all of that is much, much higher than Russia. But Russia is on full war footing. They've got the people, they've got the experience. If the conflict in Ukraine is frozen right now, I don't see any reason why they would stop pursuing their goals in other regions, right? And kind of strengthening their position. And like the problem kind of doesn't go away. But I mean, you're well aware of all of this. I think we've talked about it at length in the past. So, but yeah, I think I've done my best. I think to try to like illustrate where we're kind of at diplomatically. I think the situation is still very fraught. I think as Erlend kind of illustrated, the main issue right now is that Europe needs to kind of build an independent security capacity. That's the real bottom line here. Any like final thoughts before we move on to the final couple topics here, Erlend?
Yeah, I mean there are good signs from several countries in Europe that we're significantly going to increase our military capabilities, right? The biggest news, of course, the last few months came from Germany, but we still have countries like France, Italy, Spain that are completely unwilling to invest anything close to what is necessary. The Italians are the worst example, of course, and it's and that it disturbs my train of thought just to think about it. Like it's incredibly frustrating to see the whole rearmor Europe package being blocked by countries that are just not doing anything for the security of Europe. But it's just it doesn't look very good right now, unfortunately. But there are some positive signs, especially Germany and the Scandinavian countries, I guess.
And I don't want to tell this, but Spain just committed to reach the 2%, I think, within this year, and Italy is still bragging about that. So it's even worse.
Italy is bragging about what?
Arriving to even the 2%.
Well, they won't reach 2%.
No, exactly. I mean, because Spain had the highest growth in all the Europe, in most of European countries, I think in all Europe, they decide to commit more resources, so they will reach 2% soon. At least the government committed now. Instead, in Italy, from what I understood, they're still trying to rearrange to convince people that they are spending more, but it's not. So it's much worse than what you depicted. It's probably the least one.
Yeah, I agree with you, Daniela. I'm also Italian and I read Italian media. And I believe it was like 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago that Giorgia Meloni was bragging about perhaps we are going to reach the 2% for NATO. And most of the people are against that, to be honest, because they have no clue about the big danger from the east and from the west, to be honest. So no, it's really frustrating. And I'm Italian and live in Norway, where the perception of reality is the opposite. And I'm really glad that I'm living here, even if in Norway we got a border with Russia. But I was in Italy 2 weeks ago, and it's unbelievable to see and to hear how different people think there. And a big issue is about media. The media in Italy are so infiltrated by Russian propaganda at any level, which is terrible. Really, I would like to see more counteraction from European Union to counter Russian propaganda in our territories. That should be a priority, together with rearming.
Yeah, it's definitely true. I think U.S. just shut down BOA and stuff. I did want to ask you guys. There's a couple Italians here. That Meloni had an extended meeting with Zelensky recently. Normally, I don't cover that stuff, but I am curious. What anything in the Italian media about like what happened in the meeting or anything significant come from that?
If I if I can start about that, I don't really read much about Italian media because there are two parties on both sides, either too much pro Meloni or too much against Meloni. So Meloni, she says that is really pro Ukraine, pro NATO. I don't really trust her, and the other parties in her government, which are Lega Nord, is totally pro Russian. So you cannot trust them. Salvini is the guy who was on the Red Square with the Putin T-shirt many years ago. The other party is the old Berlusconi party. They were also very close to Putin. I don't know. Meloni, she's got a decent rhetoric for being pro-Ukraine, but I don't really trust her. On the other side, you got a few parliament representative from the left-hand side who are really good, trustworthy people supporting Ukraine. Like, I don't know if I can say the name, but there is a lady for. She's the deputy head of European Parliament from Democratic Parliament, and she is very good pro-Ukraine politician, Pina Pichardo, and but on the left hand side you got a lot of people who still go after the Russian propaganda about against NATO, against USA, and no Italian public opinion is really split and very badly informed. Media and politics in Italy are really doing a bad work about the invasion of Ukraine. And I believe that both Erlend and Daniela would agree with me.
Yeah, unfortunately, the general media picture is very sad. But I would say that there are some very, very good journalists as well that are among the best reporters, international reporters that go to Ukraine regularly. The problem is that they're drowning in what I would say is a very tabloid format where sensationalism and drama is more appreciated than very good information and good accurate reporting and analysis. Unfortunately, like you see, if you look at debates in Italy, they tend to favor inviting people that shout and scream a lot and not so much people that are interesting, which is very sad.
Sorry, just to add something on the starting of this conversation, and add more depression. Spain at the beginning of this year planned to reach to 2% in 2029. Now they plan to do this within 2025. So this is to give you the perspective of a government that is able to change mind and understand priorities, and of course also use more money at its disposal. As I said, economy in Spain is growing very well, so they say, why not? There is a threat, there is a need, there is the possibility, let's do it. Italy, which would be one of the most interested in this area, since Italy develops a lot of system. One of these is SAMT, completely decided to become like a sideshow for European rearmament and defense programs. And on a more sweet side note, looks like that UK and Starmer is trying to sign this agreement between Europe and UK in order to have a deep collaboration with the EU. So things are moving, I think, in a good direction on this part. Also because a months ago, UK and BDA essentially entered into the interceptor program, which was only hosted by Italy and France. And I think the idea is to move some production of Aster 30 and 15, which are also useful for UK Navy in UK in order to increase the production. But this is still a long way to go, but show a pattern. The only problem is the speed on how these things happen. It should occur faster. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think they're like it's kind of a big background thing going on, but basically like the EU and the UK have sat down for some trade negotiations, and like the gist of it is like the EU is doing a bunch of rearming programs right now, and most of that money is going to favor EU countries, and the UK is trying to say like, look, can we get in on a little bit of that? We can make some systems for you cheaper that are good. And the UK, I think, is maybe willing to look at fishing rights over that. That's always been a big contention with the EU and all that. And then there's also man, I lost my train of thought. But there's another issue that the Trump trade war. They're like, maybe now that things have gotten kind of crazy with the US, it's better to have an agreement between each other, right? So seems like there's positive developments on that. I think obviously it'd be a good thing for the EU and the UK to integrate more on defense and on trade. So it's like good stuff. Erlend, you are of course a proud Norwegian. I wanted to bring up that NASAMS achieved a record apparently this week that they shot down 11 cruise missiles in 2 minutes with NASAMS. So good on them. Yeah, good on Raytheon in Norway. Good job, guys. And then I think my last bit for this week.
Hey, what Raytheon?
Sorry, I don't know. All right, yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't have tainted your beautiful Norwegian compliment with that.
I'm offended, and I'm not even Norwegian.
Okay. Last item is just some things Donald Trump has said, because why not? So of course there was the famous Vladimir stop. Some good memes came out of that. Basically, Russia, the strategic forces launched a missile into Sumy and killed a bunch of people. It was really terrible. And they actually, as far as I know, Putin actually acknowledged that it was like that they hit civilians or something in a speech. But anyway, the point is, it was a big attack. It was really bad. And as a result, Trump put out like an angry Truth Social post, and it said like, Vladimir, stop. And of course, I think a lot of people kind of made fun of it as like very impotent. The other issue is he said, tapping me along. I don't know if I've ever heard that phrase. I think the more common phrase is stringing me along, but that seemed to be the context of what he was saying. In his Truth Social post, he went on kind of a rant about his typical rant, I would say, about how this all is kind of like Biden and Obama's fault. They kind of set all the stage for this. They didn't stop Putin and so forth. And then, like, why is it now all on him to do all this? And Putin's kind of his friend. And but then at the end, he basically said, like, I don't know, man. Seems like Putin might just be tapping me along. And I don't know. I personally would be of the opinion that I think like there's a few things at play here. I think that genuinely Trump is probably impatient. He wants some kind of a PR victory. He wants his Nobel Peace Prize, and he is sick of kind of the Russians, feeling like they're in a better position and not really being sincere about what they want to make real, give Trump what he wants. So that's going on. The other thing that's going on is he was in Europe. He was at the funeral of the Pope. And I don't know, it just seems like he was maybe in a good mood. A bunch of world leaders he ran into, talked to him for a while. There's a bunch of gold everywhere. Everyone's saying he's important. Maybe he just felt good. And I think like he heard through osmosis, maybe he collected some ideas about what's going on in Europe and with Ukraine. And I'm hoping that maybe sticks with him. I don't know. A bunch of crazy people back home will probably disabuse him of those sane notions shortly, forthwith. And then, so I think those are probably the two main like forces at work in this man's mind. But I don't know. It still seems like there's no real plan coming from the White House about how to actually expedite these negotiations and get serious. There are some movements from lower levels of the U.S. Republicans. So Newt Gingrich and I think Senator Chuck Grassley have started some legislation to start putting more serious sanctions on Russia. We're not seeing really serious movement yet against Russia from the U.S., but there's, I would say, increasing evidence that there's a faction of the Republicans that are getting louder because they're not seeing progress on this issue. So not like the best. I'm not going to try to sell this as like amazing news, but it's like sort of decent news, I guess. So I think that's my summary. Go ahead, Erlend.
I guess so. It seems to me like there are a bunch of Americans realizing that the US can't just dictate everything that happens around in the world without, actually providing some hard force. The US can definitely do more or less what they want with any country militarily, but unless they're willing to do that, it seems like the world is just going to go along its own path. And it seems like some people in the US thought that wasn't the case, and now they're realizing the world is a little bit more complicated than how it is. I remember back when Trump was just instated as in his second term, some Americans that I talk to often said, like, Ukraine is so fucked right now. There's going to be forced settlement, and it's going to happen very fast. And there's 100% guarantee this is going to happen. And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, there are some other, things to consider here than the US. And they were like, no, dude, this is just how it's going to be because Trump is a madman, and Ukraine doesn't have a chance without the US. And yeah, I think the world is a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, and like ironically, I think the US's biggest instrument of influence was its control over the economic system, and that control was contingent on it being a sane actor that follows, coherent rules, and that those rules apply more or less equally to everyone. Obviously, there's shady dealings going on in the global economy. I'm not here to suggest that there aren't, but you get the idea. That's how the system's supposed to run, ideally. Yeah. And, he threw a giant wrench in that and really undermined a lot of the economic influence, at least in the short term, possibly in the long term. We'll see. And so it's one of the largest in soft influences the U.S. now had over the world is kind of been thrown into question. And yeah, definitely to stress, like, the sanctions have really done a number on Russia and Iran over the last decade. Like, those countries have really been crippled by those sanctions. So having the U.S. lose that instrument would be pretty serious. And we're right now looking down that path unless we really smarten up about U.S. economic policy over here anyway.
Yep. Hey, I want to leave final thoughts to Alex, but before that, I just want to announce that we're going to have a very cool stream next Sunday because some people from Come Back Alive are going to join us and talk about their drone fall program. So I recommend everyone to tune in next Sunday. And then I guess if Alex has any final thoughts, since you had your fantastic interview, I think you can close out with that.
Thank you for that, Erlend. No, I don't have anything specific to end our streaming tonight, but I really believe that the final 4 minutes of the interview with Petro gave hope because, when I'm analyzing the information from Mariupol, Donetsk, Makivka, and the occupied territories in Donetsk, very often I feel sadness, and sometimes I really feel that, my God, are we going to see those territories free again? But the final part of the interview by Petro tonight, they really give hope because you see that people from those territories. And by the way, for those who do not know, Petro is displaced and is living in Dnipro. So he is living under more or less constantly bombing. He's giving hope because they truly believe that they will see freedom again soon. Not in a faraway future, but he said 2026 we will work with probably Ukrainian boots on the ground to free Mariupol. So that's why we need to support, and by we I mean Europe, first of all, and hopefully US again. And
Absolutely.
I believe that everybody here in Tochnyi is very aligned on that.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so thank you, Alex, for an excellent interview. Hopefully, you'll be back next week for, as Erlend said, our Comeback Alive interview. Wasn't sure if I was allowed to plug that, if everything was confirmed. I'm going to assume it is now because Erlend confirmed it. So, yeah, let's do it, man. I'm real excited for it. This is going to be a great interview with Comeback Alive. Anything else you want to say about it?
Well, just bring people and good questions, because I think what they are doing, their model, is something we should learn from, because it's in a way a part of the future of security infrastructure. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Really excited for this interview. Looking forward to it. Hopefully, you guys are too in chat. And yeah, spread the word, as Erlend said. We're looking forward to it, and very, very happy that Comeback Alive agreed to do it. Cool. Alex, do you have any other, like, someone's asking, you have like social media, anything you want to let people know where they can hear more about you?
Well, of course, there is my own X account, which is forlex5, and also on Blue Sky. Tochnyi, who retweets my content very often, and also those channels that we shared in the live description tonight. And anyway, you can reach out to me, perhaps on X, so I can share more information.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks, of course, everyone, for tuning in this week. We really appreciate it. Thanks to our panel. Special thanks to Alex for doing a great interview. And yeah, we appreciate everyone. Please do hit the like and subscribe button for all future updates to Tochnyi. Check out our Twitter, Blue Sky. Check out our website, tochnyi.info. There's a lot of great articles there and all sorts of other stuff, interactive maps, cool things. And yeah, always feel welcome to provide your feedback or questions. We're happy to get more information about what you guys want to know about. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see everyone next week, same time, 2100 Kyiv time on Sunday. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.
Героям слава.
Героям слава.
On behalf of the brave.